Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final session of Education Past, Present, Future. Thank you for joining us. For those who don't know me, I'm Jo Symes. I'm the founder of Progressive Education, which raises awareness of alternatives to conventional schooling and campaigns for change. This event has been organised in celebration of a new course on alternatives to conventional schooling, and I'll be sharing a bit more about that at the end. But first of all, welcome to Lea and Noah. So, Lea is the founder of Mission Equality and the co-founder of POP Hove, which ran a 12-week self-directed learning pilot last year. And Noah is one of the young people that took part. Thanks, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Over to you
Good to be
guys.
here. Just reorganizing my windows for different events so I can see the chat. But if I do miss anything in the chat, Joe, can you just kind of shout at me? Because it like
I've
Yeah,
got the
will
chat
do.
open anyways.
okay, if you want to shout it.
Would you like people to put questions in the chat while you're talking, or do you want to save questions for the
Yes.
end?
I'm happy either way. I'm probably going. I might stop at kind of each. I don't want this to. An hour is a long time for us to just to talk at people. So we've got a
Yeah.
slide deck. So I'm hoping that we might maybe just kind of stop at the end of each slide if people have got questions.
Yeah, okay, that's
I
Yeah.
good.
think it might be better to just do it all the way through. But if I miss anything, if you can just nudge me.
Well, did you say you can't see the chat?
I can kind of see, yeah, I just got all the kind of windows on my screen, which
Okay,
just covers things up, but I think I can just about see the chat. So
okay, cool. So if anything's missed, I will give you a shout.
thank you. Um,
Great.
so okay. Thanks for joining, everyone. I can't see who's here either. So, my name's Lea Jovy. As Joe said, I'm the founder and CEO of a community interest company called Mission Equality, and we use education as an agent for change. So I work at two different levels. I work with young people, which we're going to talk about more today, and I also do quite a lot of consulting for workplaces and organisations, often non-profits, and I work with senior leadership teams. So part of the drive of doing the pilot that we're going to talk about today is because I'm kind of at the other end of the scale and I see what happens in workplaces and organizations and I see the kind of lack of skills and I see the lack of preparation of our young people coming out of the education system. Um, so I'm joined today by Noah. Hello, Noah.
Yes. Hello.
Noah is one of the young people who took part in our 12-week pilot. And do you want to introduce yourself, Noah?
Yes, I am obviously Noah. I am doing a fitness diploma now. I've been home educated the vast majority of my life, but I've had a little bit of experience in school. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I attended POP, the pilot. So
You're 16?
yeah, 16.
17 in August. So let me just remember to. So we're going to talk today about building better pathways into the world of work. So I've got two children, they're 13 and 16, home educated right from the beginning because I've never believed that the system is going to equip them for the world that they'll be going into. So part of the drive of Pop Hove is can we do things a little bit better and prepare young people more at the sort of older end of the kind of 12 to 16-year-olds, just pathways into the world of work and equip them better and show them that there are different options from the kind of conventional, typical pathways into career paths that I think many young people are sort of pushed into at school. So anyway. I think we probably all know the system, it's not actually broken, it's designed, it's doing what it was designed to do, but it was designed for a world that no longer exists. And certainly in the world of work, I see the skills that are coming out that are needed, but both leadership level and from young people. And they're just not equipped for the connection, the collaboration, the communication, all of the kind of things, the problem solving that I attended the session this morning. And I think the young people represented themselves so brilliantly because they were talking about exactly the kinds of skills that are missing in the world of work today. Noah, just to, I'd kind
Yeah.
of like to get your perspective all the way through. I think you've
Yeah.
done 4 months of school, did you say?
Yes, around half a year. But it was in primary school, so I was much younger.
Okay. So someone who's never really attended school
Yeah.
kind of been in the system. What's your perspective of the system? Kind of what do you see?
I think based on the short time that I did spend there and other people that I've talked to that do go to school, I don't think it's useful for almost anyone, whether it's people who will are almost held back because the school doesn't match their pace, and also people where the pace is too fast so they can't keep up. And I think if people could control the pace in which they learned and what they wanted to learn as well, instead of such a rigid system, then they'd be able to actually learn and educate themselves better, and also learn about things that they actually enjoy, and so can be more knowledgeable and passionate about in general.
So as I've mentioned, I kind of work in workplaces and organizations. I do quite a lot of mentoring and consulting, and just being able to see what employers want and need, and looking at the skill sets and I call them competencies, and it's adaptability, flexibility, problem solving, kind of proactive self-management, which I think comes from the self-directedness that I see many home educated people have. And I think we know that the school system doesn't actually cultivate these things. No, I know you're doing personal training
Yes.
Yes.
Level 3 one.
What kind of skills do you feel like you need and that you're needing to show that you're developing as a home educated person, as opposed to maybe not having that in the school system?
Well, personally, I would say that almost everyone home educated that I've met is a lot more self-directed and confident than people who go to school, surprisingly, compared to what people say about them being socially inept. But I definitely wouldn't be as motivated as I am, and I don't think I would end up doing as much stuff as I do. And also, I'd be a lot more nervous after I came out of a bit more of a formal learning setting. I was a lot more nervous and anxious compared to when I did most of it myself. And also, I'm a lot more independent. And I feel like a lot of people who go to school, they often have to look to other people for help or guidance most of the time, because that's what they're taught to do in school anyways. But I've never really had to do that personally. And I think that is something that I will appreciate later on.
So one of the paradigm shifts, I know that kind of we talked a little bit about at POP Hove. One of the we focused on sort of themes and topics, and we had a monthly theme. And the first one we started with was power. And one of the things that we often talk about is this kind of the shift, the paradigm shift. I think is really necessary, both in the education system and the world of work, from power and control to trust and freedom. And I know from listening to the young people this morning, at least two of them talked a lot about the impact and the kind of massive benefit of the freedom that alternative progressive approaches to education, I think, provide for young people. And then the other topic that was quite a hot topic this morning was AI. So
Yeah.
You and I sometimes know I have some conversations about AI. I think it's really interesting to hear the thoughts that you have as you're
Yeah.
entering this world of work. I mean, I see the impact on AI, and one of the things I think I'm really concerned about is unemployment levels. Actually, I think they're down this month, but they have been rising and will continue to rise. And I know, like, the big four and I think Meta and many of the big companies and organizations are basically eradicating and eliminating their graduate programs and their entry level programs, which has a big effect for the kind of opportunities and positions and spaces, the pathways into the world of work that you would have. What are your thoughts on AI?
I think it has its place, but I don't think it should be as accessible as it is for most people, because anyone could use it for anything, especially generative AI, where you can just make whatever photo you want of anyone. I think that can be very harmful, especially as it advances to become even more realistic. I also think that people depend on it way too much, to the point where a lot of people, they'll just ask it for anything and they can't really have their own thoughts anymore, and they'll just ask a robot, which I think is also similar to in school, and I think people get it from that. But I think in medical settings, for example, where they use it to discover cancer or something early, I think that's helpful, and I think it should be developed more there. But I don't think it should be developed anymore for the public, because I think it can just cause more harm than it's worth, personally.
I would really like to hear actually, because I think AI is such a hot topic at the moment in kind of obviously education, but also just in the world of work. If anyone has any kind of thoughts or experiences, or I'm fascinated by young people's approaches because I know my kids are very anti AI. I think they tend not to use it. I mean, it's one of the first places I think many adults go. um,
Yeah.
to kind of find the answer to questions, but I don't know that all of the younger generations, I mean, the young people who spoke this morning, they were very pro AI in many ways, and I
Yeah,
mean, very sensible about it. But it's not the first place. Is it the first place you go to?
definitely not. I would say actually Generation Z is probably more anti-AI overall, but Gen Alpha definitely isn't. So,
Gen Alpha is that what what age is that? Is that Samsung's
like
12?
my age and younger, not my age, like 15 and younger, but some people say it's 13 and younger, so it depends. So let's
Okay,
just say 13 and younger. So yeah, Samson's age.
okay.
But I have found that more people my age and in my generation are against it, but people who are younger are more for it.
Why is that?
I I'm not 100% sure. I would guess it's because a lot of Generation Z is more woke and creative, and so generative AI is very harmful for like jobs that they want and things like that
So the
because of the
creators, yeah.
yeah, and the impact on the planet. I think that has something to do with it. Whereas Gen Alpha, I think they're a bit less. Well, I found personally that they're less woke than Gen Z is,
Okay.
but obviously there's exceptions in both.
So we ran this 12-week pilot last year, and we called it. We're based in Hove, so the POP Hove. POP stands for Pursuit of Progress, and it was 12-week pilot for 12 to 16-year-olds, and we had I think about 12 different young people in the room from quite different backgrounds, and what we wanted to do was create a very different kind of learning space, which I'm just going to skip ahead to the next slide. Because part of the key that we wanted, part of the kind of USP, if you like, sort of special thing that we wanted to test was the impact of the environment. So we actually ran it and held it in a very different kind of space. I mean, I know from my experience of taking my kids to many home ed activities, they're typically held in like community centres and church
Yeah,
halls, particularly nice places. So where we held the pilot was a very, very nice. I meant to get a photo actually. Really, really nice, almost like a co-working space for adults. It was very well equipped. We had a full kitchen, we had a massive table, we had a kind of sofa, we had access to an outdoor terrace with table tennis, really nicely decorated. Um, and we had various hypotheses that we wanted to test by running this pilot, which was what might the impact of an environment like this have on young people and their kind of motivation to attend. And just, I mean, it was quite a big space for the number of people we had. And would it help? We really wanted them to be comfortable moving around the space and almost feeling like it was kind of their own space to move around. Um, and so the way that we ran it, we had various different organized and structured activities that we planned every week. But again, the young people could join or they could not join, and they could bring their own projects and do their own things. And we had a number of different activities that were kind of run at different times. We had a 3-4 hour session, I think, once a week.
yeah,
And it was kind of designed around the space that we had. So we had lots of things happening on the big table. We often had a kind of cooking baking thing in the kitchen area. We had sort of videos and different things playing. There was like a little sofa area, and it was a very free and flexible space that was designed to allow just free movement for the teens to move around as they wanted. We also had some guest people come in, so we had a tech person come in, and you did vibe coding for a few weeks, so you used Lovable to vibe code a website or an app. We had an investment banking person come in to talk about investing and the history of money. Noah, what was your sort of experience of just the space itself?
I
Do you
found the atmosphere a lot more pleasant than, like you said, other home ed places. Usually, a lot of them are like other home educating parents that perhaps don't have the budget to go to other places. So it's often like not the nicest environment, and I'd often end up trying to like retreat to somewhere else. But the environment there was much nicer and definitely like you'd want to go again rather than avoid it.
I think that's what we found, is that the young people, and we had a couple of young people who had quite specific learning needs, and to begin with, sort of just literally came and sat. They just sat at the table and brought their own thing and didn't really communicate and talk to people to begin with. And I think the environment itself had such a big impact on their experience, because they came back, even though as facilitators in the room, I think my business partner and I, a lady called Jules, was sometimes a bit worried that, like, are they getting anything out of this? Is this a good experience for them? But the fact that they kept coming back, because actually it was just a really nice environment. I think the energy, the decor, just the facilities were great. And I think that had a big impact on people just wanting to come back and even just sit and be in the space, and be surrounded by other young people, even if they didn't necessarily interact and engage. So anything else you want to sort of talk about with the environment, Joe? You can look it up, actually. You can Google it. It was called Moda. And I actually lived there. So it's quite a new development in Hove. If you search Moda, Moda Hove, it's basically a sort of residential development with about 4 or 5 buildings, but they have really good facilities. They have a gym, they have a co-working space, they have a kind of residence lounge, they have like a yoga studio, and then they had what they call the private dining room, I think, which is this big space, which is the space that we rented, and it's I don't really know what the size is, but I mean it's big, and there was a plenty of space for everybody to move around and feel comfortable, and then it opens out onto a really nice terrace. So you can, I did mean to get some photos, but you can Google it and you can have a look at the impact and the kind of, it's a very different kind of space. Like, even as an adult, I would be very happy co-working there. It was really nice. So one of the things I think I talked before, just our approach, just a kind of educational approach to the whole pilot, was very much about self-directed, giving agency to the young people to basically use the space as they wanted. So we would suggest different activities every week. So we had themes, and I think the first monthly theme was power. We had story, and then was it sense for the third month, I think. And we would have a group activity that was planned around this particular theme every week, for 4 weeks. And again, it was all the young people could become involved if they wanted to, or do their own thing. I think we had almost everybody joined in the group activities. Am I remembering right? I think so. No, didn't they?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I think that the vast majority, that we had a couple of young people who literally just came and sat and just wanted to be surrounded by other young people, but they didn't necessarily take part. But we also found that kind of intrinsic motivation. So one of the young people found it very difficult communicating and collaborating with the other teens in the room to begin with, certainly for the first few weeks, and actually needed their parent in the room for the first couple of weeks. But by the end of it, they actually wanted to lead a session. So we also had Oscar Milo, my eldest, led a session on, was there a session? Was
Yeah.
it some creative session? And so we had an Oscar, who's another of the 16-year-olds, also led sessions on 3D printing. So there was a group of sort of 2 or 3 12, 13-year-old boys and Oscar took them through over the course of about 4 or 5 weeks, the process of how to sort of design and 3D print various different objects. And so what we found was just the environment and that approach really encouraged that kind of peer accountability, and that self-directed as opposed to sort of top-down, you will present or you will do this. The learners were kind of accountable to each other, which I think was created a really nice learning environment. And we had people volunteering and wanting to lead sessions, which I think is quite unusual. It's not something I ever wanted to do at school.
Yeah, I would say that people wanting to lead the sessions anyways is more than proof that it's a better environment in the first place. Because I don't think I can think of anyone who would want to volunteer for something at school to do anything like that ever.
No, and I think that brings us on quite nicely because I think it was a sense of safety. And so some of the skill sets, and I talk about this, this is the work I do actually in the kind of the world of work and with leadership teams, is I talk about competencies and skill sets. And instead of the typical like leadership development and training, I focus on 4 core domains, which are emotional management, communication, leadership, which is self-leadership and before you can lead others, and then achieving equality. And so these were the 4 sort of skill sets that we wanted to try and build into and bring into the various different activities and into the learning space across the 12 weeks. Not necessarily in really obvious and direct ways, often quite subtle, but I mean, the emotional management piece is crucial. And I think pathways, if we're talking about pathways into the world of work and equipping young people, one of the things that I see that is really harmful and damaging in the workplace are leaders who cannot manage themselves emotionally, and it's really common. And I think, many of us who've kind of worked have probably been harmed and had difficult situations with managers because they've actually not been able to manage themselves emotionally. So it was one thing that we really wanted to focus on in the space and with young people, because that emotional management and the ability to manage themselves, the ability to kind of feel their emotions, process them, manage them, understand what's going on for them, that sort of self-awareness leads to their better ability to connect with themselves, which leads to better able to connect with others. And then communication improves, collaboration improves, connection improves. And we saw that over the course of 12 weeks. And I think just coming back to your point of Noah, of young people being willing to and wanting to and actually really wanting to lead sessions created that sense of safety and the kind of desire to collaborate and connect with each other. And the leadership of oneself before others, I think, is also something we saw. So that was the self-directed element. And I mean, we had one of the last sessions, it was just before Christmas. And it was a brilliant session. We did a group session on, I don't know what you call it, icing. We basically created a cake, and then we had a kind of scene and some sort of winter scene, and one of the young people had made a wedding cake for one of their family members and had learned how to do flowers, amazing flowers out of icing. So they wanted to lead the final session, and we had a brilliant session on kind of sculptures out of icing. Not really sure how to describe it, but we saw the progression of people really wanting to step in and actually lead others, which to me is brilliant, because that's what I think is missing, that I still see as missing in the world of work, is that ability to lead others in a really natural and organic way that doesn't look like, it doesn't come from a place of power and control, but it comes from this kind of desire to connect and collaborate and work together. And I'm not sure how you felt now, but I really felt towards
Yeah,
the last week was a really, really great week to end on. It kind
yeah,
of,
definitely.
I think, of everything that we'd been trying to work towards. I'm going to pause at this point. Are there any kind of questions specifically about the pilot, what we did, the impacts of it? I can see comments. No.
I've got a question, Leah.
Yeah.
Um, how did you come up with the topic ideas, and who sort of decided those key topics that you were going to follow?
So we the adults did to begin with, and we had a kind of sense of like what could be topics that would be quite relevant to the sort of hypothesis we were testing. So I talked about the kind of the paradigm shift from power and control to trust and freedom. So we thought power would be a great one to start with. Like, what will young people bring to the table if we introduce the topic of power? And so we did the first activity was basically a kind of massive mind map on this big table of like when we say the word power, what comes to mind? And we had this big long scroll of paper, and all the young people just wrote everything down. And then that kind of informed what we did with the rest of the sort of the 3 weeks of the topic of power. Um, and then one of the things that we were quite keen to do, so the second topic was story, and the reason why we chose that. So we asked for feedback, and generally the young people were happy with the suggestion, so we just went with it. And the reason we chose story is one of the kind of themes that we wanted that was running throughout the 12 weeks was for pathways into the world of work, how can we support young people to tell their own story and kind of sell themselves as they think about preparing to, go for job interviews or like do other kind of further qualifications. So beyond the conventional CV, so CVs are still needed, but like, can they put together a body of work, or have they already got a body of work that helps tell the story of them? So we had a couple of ongoing projects, and one of them was called The Story of You, and it ran across the whole 12 weeks, which was about what could you create? What would you want to create if you want to create something which tells the story of you in a more creative way than a CV? So is it a portfolio that you might want to put together? Is it like a show reel? Is it a website? Is it something that tells your story, that kind of sells you as you're thinking about launching yourself into adulthood and into the world of work? And then the third one was sensors. And again, we kind of chose them thinking that they would be really quite broad, interesting topics to see that were broad enough to see where the young people might take them themselves, as opposed to we had ideas, we had all kinds of ideas. Um, but we wanted them to be broad enough that the young people could basically just take them wherever they wanted them to, and explore and engage with them in all kinds of different ways. Um, and I think it generally worked quite well. I mean, we had it was interesting. It was really interesting because we I'm sure most people know who've kind of ever facilitated sessions or taught. You do so much preparation for it to seem really relaxed, for it to seem really like free flowing. And the preparation that we put into, so we had 3 adults in the room, that we put into every session was quite extensive. It took us quite a few hours to think about the kind of different activities and different things and how to sequence it and how to plan it. In order that it felt very free flowing and very kind of natural and organic, and the young people could participate or they didn't have to participate, but we still wanted to be organized and planned so that if we saw people just disengaging or not particularly knowing what to do, come and try this activity, let's do this, let's do that. And the only time that we really encouraged the young people to sort of sit down and participate was when we had the guest speakers and the guest facilitators. But otherwise it was very much kind of an invitation to participate, and then they could either participate or not. But the amount of planning that went into that so that we had activities ready was quite extensive.
And you said you brought people in, like external facilitators in or experts. What kind of people did you bring in?
We had a lady who she used to be on the board of Women Who Code, and so she's a sort of woman in tech, co-founder of a couple of AI sort of powered tech companies and startups, and she did 3, 4 sessions on vibe coding. So we introduced Lovable. I don't know if you've heard of it as a tool. So it's an AI tool basically where you can code. So you can go in and you basically ask it to tell it to do something, build a website that does this, and it does it all in the background. So it's an amazing tool to prototype things. So one of the so my youngest is very good at baking, and I wanted him to, I wanted him to build an app called Bod, which would have been baking on demand. So he wasn't keen. He could have used Lovable to go in and basically say, help me build an app that does this, where I can bake and I can put it out to residents of the building that we were living in, and they can pay and they can buy like 2 cookies. But Lovable is an AI tool that basically would have allowed him to build that really just with prompts. So he wouldn't have had to learn how to code or anything like that. It was literally just ask it to do this and it will build this for you. And obviously AI, the use of AI is how good you are at prompting and how good you are at directing it. So that was, I think 3 weeks with Naomi talking about sort of how to use AI and what it can be used for. And then we had a guy who's an investment banker for an organization in Singapore, I think, and he came in to talk about kind of investing, but we actually asked him to start a little bit before that. So he talked about the history of money and commerce and how it developed and why it developed in the way that it developed. And Noah, did he play a game? I think he played some games with you, didn't he? Which is
Yeah.
really interesting. I wasn't in the room at the time, so, but I think, I mean, what was your experience of Ash?
He was very good at talking to people who were younger in like a way that they would understand, like with the games and stuff. And I think that he captured everyone's attention very well. And it was just easy to understand in general, and I think it worked.
I think one of the goals that we had for the pilot was to really, I mean, I kind of call it planting seeds, but sort of put experiences and other people and other professionals and other types of careers into the paths of the young people so that it just expanded their world and expanded their options. And I mean, it was a 3-month pilot. We had talked about, we have got plans to maybe, well, to do something kind of slightly bigger and broader than that. And again, I think the same goals apply, which is how can we expand and expose people, young people, to all of the different opportunities and like really creative people. I mean, we're in Brighton and Hove. It's a really entrepreneurial community. There's lots of people doing fascinating things. And how can we facilitate those people sort of showing that there are other pathways into the world of work that don't look like the conventional, traditional pathways that I know many people from my generation have followed. That maybe are entrepreneurship, or maybe they're not, but there are lots of different career paths that I don't always think, that even I'm not aware of, that open people's eyes to the opportunities and the different options that exist. So I call it, and I think just kind of phrasing and wording, I call the sort of conventional pipeline the sort of schooling to employment, which is just this very conventional conveyor belt, which really doesn't give people agency and choice. And what I think the kind of premise of what we were doing and what we would like to continue to do is just shift that, and even just shift the languaging from a sort of school to work, from to learning to leadership, because it's then much more, I think, again, about skill sets and competencies and capabilities, as opposed to an environment here to an environment here, which is just within the system. And actually what we're talking about is, learning how to learn and ongoing learning. And that, I mean, we all need to do that, particularly with the rise of AI and the kind of ongoing march of AI. We're all having to learn how to, like, the impact of AI, how to use AI, what's it going to do to our jobs, what is it doing in workplaces, and that has significant impacts. I mean, it will have significant impact on leadership, and particularly, I think, as organizations are removing the kind of lower levels and the graduate levels and the entry levels, that's where people cut their teeth. It's where, you as a graduate, Noah, might join an
Yeah.
organization, and you learn how to lead by looking at the people around you and by being led and by being managed and looking at the people above you and around you. If those jobs and those layers don't exist, where do people learn how to lead? And where do they develop the skill sets and the competencies needed? And so I think it will be interesting. It's a very interesting time, but I think we may be creating a very big gap that we may not be thinking about how to fill it and how it's going to be filled in the coming years. What are your thoughts on leadership, Noah?
I think that school encourages people to be, like you say, more obedient. And so they'll just do whatever someone tells them to. And whenever they don't have someone who's in charge or a boss, they just don't know what to do with themselves. And it's like, it's like really mean. They're a little bit incompetent by themselves, personally. But it is just because they're so used to having someone tell them what to do. And even when people who go to high school go to college or university, they struggle more because there's less and less structure when they've been so used to being like berated with it. So I think it would be much better if like people could learn more on their own accord and like teach themselves in a way that actually works for them. Obviously, like still learning and still having somewhat of an education and still having like a baseline stuff that you need to know. But I think if people did it on their own terms and like structured it themselves and had to like manage themselves, so they have like I did do GCSEs and I from year 9 to doing my GCSEs, I did it pretty much all myself with no one like teaching me or telling me when to do it. And I got it done like way ahead of schedule and I passed it all. And I found that being able to do that means that I'm much more self-driven and self-led and able to figure things out on my own rather than having to go to someone else for it.
Yeah.
So I think that if there was at least a less harsh or less berating system, I think a lot more people would be able to be like leaders.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just watching the session this morning. A couple of the older kids were also very self-directed, very self-aware, very self-motivated. We see that in home education worlds. It does tend to equip young people to be much more self-directed and self-motivated, and it is a massive problem and a challenge in the world of work. I find it in my own organization, my own company. I am currently facing a challenge with somebody who has said that they want to do a particular role and they've had 6 months and they're not doing the job. And um, it's finding people who can lead themselves and manage themselves without needing to be told what to do. And I think the impact of AI is interesting because you said earlier, Noah, that
Yeah.
I think one of the risks and one of the dangers is that people stop thinking for themselves. And I know some of the kids this morning were talking about it encourages people to almost stop thinking for themselves because instead of initially having to use your own brain, you go to AI and you ask it the
Yeah.
question and it comes up with an answer. And it isn't always right. I mean, it makes things up. When it doesn't know, it makes things up. Um, and I think that's a huge risk, actually, that we are potentially walking into with AI as a tool, which is we're just encouraging people not to continue to engage and think for themselves. And it's already a skill that's missing in the
Yeah.
workplace.
I would say that it massively increases like people's incompetency and just reliance on other things. And so people just, well, they just don't really do much for themselves personally, in my experience. My dad uses it a lot and he just found out what it is and he uses it for like everything. And then he comes to me and he shows me it and he's like, look at this that I've done. And then I ask him, I'm like, is that AI? And he's like, yeah. And you can tell every single time. And everyone makes it out to be like this amazing tool. And I do think that it has its purposes, but I also think that it's often wrong and people rely on it way too much. And if you just go for it for things, then you're going to be wrong a lot of the time. Whereas if you do more like, even if you just use Google as well as AI, I think that is better. But people who solely use it, I don't think they're going to be very well off.
I think it's interesting when we're talking about pathways into the world of work because I do think AI it is going to have significant impact on the skill sets and the capabilities needed. And I know some of the work that we're doing at the moment is how can you, so I work with people who want to set up their own businesses as well. But the advice that I would give to people now, and this includes young people, differs massively from what I would have said 12 months ago, because one of the kind of some of the kind of lowest barriers to entry sort of jobs were things like graphic design or social media manager or like copywriter or freelance writer. And because people use AI to do those things now instead of thinking or hiring somebody else to do it. It's actually cutting out, again, a whole layer of kind of opportunity and options for people who maybe want to go freelance and who want to do it themselves, and build their own businesses. So part of that sort of future proofing, and I think learning how to work with AI is still figuring out, and I think this is so relevant for young people, particularly those who want to pursue an more entrepreneurial path, is what kind of businesses are going to be AI proof in the future. And I mean, I think personal training is an interesting one that you've chosen, because it's so I used AI to design my own fitness program. I did a personal training qualification, I think, 20 years or so ago. And it actually designed a really amazing program. So people could, like, in terms of your career and what you're doing as you think about setting yourself up as a personal trainer and, running your
Yeah.
own business, people are going to use AI. It's going to take some of your work away from you because they're going to use AI to design fitness programs and to learn about nutrition. And it may not be
Yeah.
right, but they're still going to use it because they maybe don't know any better. And in many cases, at a basic level, it will still do a good job. So from your perspective, and in lots of other different types of entrepreneurial kind of ideas, what is it that you need to do? How can you still set yourself apart? What are the skills that you can bring to the table that AI can't do, that will still mean that you have a job and a role and a business and that you can grow your business? And
Yeah.
those are the kinds of questions I think that we were talking to the young people at POP Hove, and that we continue to talk. We obviously talk about it. We continue to talk about, because it's not, again, the young people this morning were saying, AI is here to stay. It's probably not going anywhere. So how do we continue to be relevant? And I know one of the phrases this morning, which is also a phrase I think we've used before, is like, how do you continue to be more human in the face of AI? And how do you continue
Yeah.
to develop skills and competencies that AI can't do, and AI may not ever be able to do?
Yeah. I don't think there's much that AI will never be able to do, especially with the rate that it's like improving. But I would say personally, being able to do things in person probably puts me ahead of it a little bit. Yeah, even with like robots being made, it's probably not going to last very long. But even just with the knowledge I have, because people could ask AI to make them a program, perhaps like having some kind of medical issue, and then the AI obviously doesn't take that into account, and then they could hurt themselves or something like that. And I can go to people in person. I can go to people's houses, do it there, or I could work in certain gyms. I just think the in person aspect is probably what will put me ahead of it the most.
Yeah. And I think, to bring it back round to some of the kind of competences that we were talking about earlier, what you're talking about there is, communication, connection. So I think one
Yeah.
of the young people this morning mentioned caring. AI doesn't care about you. It doesn't, as much as it's, people do use it as kind of a therapy tool, and as much as it has, I know I often play Claude off against ChatGPT. Claude has a very strong personality and it sounds like it cares, as does ChatGPT at times, but it doesn't care. Whereas you, as a person going into someone's house, can build a genuine human to human connection and
Yeah.
relationship. But those are skill sets, because it certainly as a personal trainer or in many other career paths, it is about connection, communication, and collaboration, and how we build that. And AI can do that to a certain extent, but it isn't a replacement for that human to human connection.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think the main tough thing is about how fast it's getting better and how fast it is advancing. And I feel like at this point, it's like quite a harsh thing to say, but if you want to like stay ahead, you'll like have to make your own AI. So if I like really couldn't find any business, I would probably end up making my own AI model or app. that is fitness related, because at the end of the day, with the speed that things are escalating, if you don't use it, then you're probably gonna get taken out of the market by it, which sucks.
I
Because
don't think
I
you're
don't like to
wrong.
use it.
I do think it's worth mentioning that it's, it's kind of what is being put in is what you get out. And AI is still built by the same people that have built all of the technology companies to date. It's still based upon, I mean, it's just a huge pattern matching machine. So it's based upon the data that exists online already, which has all of the baked in biases that haven't changed and that probably won't change. And it is reliant upon what exists online. And that also has limitations and restrictions if we're talking about kind of resources from Indigenous people or the global South. If those aren't online, they're not going to be put into the kind of AI systems, if you like, and programmed in. And so we will continue to perpetuate some of the inequalities, well, many of the inequalities that already exist. That is something that I think is not going to help us as we kind of push towards, I know the fourth competency that we talk about is achieving equality. It's not going to help on the push towards equality for creating a world in which everybody can thrive, because it's junk in, junk out, and that isn't actually being addressed. I mean, I do know there are people working to address it, but it's the same people building, the same people at the top. I'm just time. I think we've got a few minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions or comments or thoughts or anything we haven't covered.
I was wondering, Lea, what your next steps are in terms of scaling. Are you going to have another pilot, or are you going to try and roll out something more permanent?
So the big picture was to have, and POP Hove was a kind of just a road test of it. I'd love to have other people do the same kinds of things all over the globe. So we have all of these different kind of hubs. What we're actually working on at the moment is a kind of bigger picture hub. So we did it for 12 to 16-year-olds. I want a community hub. And again, this is a kind of blueprint that can we replicate this all around the world? So it's a community hub which is based around learning and sort of progressive approaches to learning as opposed to replicating the system, which isn't just for young people, but it's for adults as well. So we have a kind of community space. We invite people. We have all kinds of different people coming in. It's multi-age learning, including adults. Probably a focus, I think, on the older sort of 12 to 18-year-olds. So again, that sort of teen, the pathways into the world of work. Because, my experience in the home ed world is that there's tons of activities for the younger kids, and there's forest school and all of the great stuff that my kids have been to. But there's so very little for this crucial age, which is, it's literally the runway into like the kind of launch pad into adulthood and the world of work. And there's really very little for young people around that exists. And I think certainly even down here in Hove, which I was told was, great for kind of home ed stuff, which it is to some extent. But if we can create a real hub that allows people of all ages, but particularly this kind of teenage, to connect with people doing amazing things in the community, and just create a real sense of sort of a learning community, but multi-ages. That's what we're working on at the moment. So we're looking at how we can kind of find a space. I don't live at Moda anymore, and it's actually not big enough. So we need a bigger space. So how can we find a space? What do we want the kind of cadence to look like? What do we want the format to look like? I'd love it to be like a 7-day-a-week hub. That is open for people to kind of drop in and co-work, and that like a really thriving learning hub is probably how I call it. So I was talking to my team today, actually, we're looking at whether we could maybe launch something in September, October this year. So that's the goal. So we've kind of tested it on a smaller scale with teens, but we'd really like to do it for, we do run programs for adults already, kind of learning programs, entrepreneurial, build your business programs remotely. But I really think one of the benefits and one of the kind of opportunities, particularly with AI, is not remote and online, it's in person. And how can we connect? How can we connect ourselves and each other, and particularly young people, into the communities to be really rooted, and find that kind of rooting and grounding. Can we do one in London? No, but we can help other people. So what I'd like to do is kind of, this is a blueprint. This is like, here's how we've done it. Please take this, take our learnings, take kind of anything that you need, and maybe do it yourself. So that we have a whole network of them, and that we can all learn from each other. And we start to, this is my element of kind of, here's how we can maybe achieve systemic change. We can maybe start to create our own little ecosystem, learning ecosystem, which provides an alternative model. And it's flexible, and it's, what works here, what works in Hove may not work in London, but the people who are in that community know best what's going to work for the people in that community. But how can we sort of do that in a way that we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time?
Sounds amazing. Has anyone else got any questions for Lea or Noah? I've got one more.
Okay.
So, blue sky thinking, what do you think the future of education looks like, say 40 or 50 years time? What do you think it'll look like, or what would you like it to look like?
I'd like it to look, yeah. I can tell you what I'd like it to look like. I don't know what it will look like. I mean, I'd like it to be, our goal is systemic change. And I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to see that. But the goal is to kind of, how can we plant some seeds, and how can we pave a path, and how can we just have a go to see what may or may not work. But I think it will be hopefully much more individual and personalized. I would like to see, I think, community and in-person community and kind of multi-age learning is going to be so crucial. And I'd like to see that happen. I think it's necessary, because I think young people think so differently to us and have so many rich inputs that we just don't think of as adults, because we're so rooted in the systemic, in the system that we've been in and that we've all been educated in. I think universities I hope that they will return to their roots, which is not commercial, and it is not the promise of come to university and get a better job and you'll get a high salary, because that just hasn't happened for years now. They were initially places of just people go because they love to learn. And I'd like to see us getting back to, I think, if AI is going to be able to take jobs and do the mundane things and the things that nobody wants to do, then I think it begs the question, what is left for us to do? And what does that mean? How do we organize ourselves as a society, basically? If AI is doing the things that we don't want to do, or the boring things, or the mundane things, or whatever, what does that leave for us as humans? And then maybe we get back to more creative pursuits. But the knock-on impact for that is obviously other systems, which is, well, okay, how do we then get access to, we all need money at the moment to live and for shelter and food and those kind of basic resources. But how do we have access to those if we're flipping the script and we don't need, or there aren't jobs for us to do to earn money? I don't know if so there's Maslow's hierarchy, but it was actually, he stole it from an indigenous tribe, and he puts kind of security, safety, like housing and shelter and food at the bottom, and it's actually flipped. The original source is actually flipped, and it is much more about kind of self-actualization at the bottom, with the assumption that everybody has access to the basics that they need for safety and security. So let's say we did have that, whether that's through universal basic income or something else. But if society was based upon us all having access to the basics, what do we do as humans? There's a really great way, it's great, interesting word. There's an interesting essay, I think it's called AI 2027, and it's written by Sam Altman, one of the founders, possibly of OpenAI. And it talks about two different futures if AI continues potentially as it looks like it might, and what those futures look like. And one of them is basically humans don't need to do any work. So what do we become? And what do we do as a species on this planet? And then therefore, what's the purpose of education? What do we need education for? So we come back round to what is the purpose of education. And I think that's going to change, based upon kind of technology and the impact that has.
Thanks, Lea. Derry's got his hand up, but I wonder if we could, Noah, did you have anything you'd like to add on your thoughts of the future of education?
Someone just asked anyways. I think that 40 to 50 years in the future, it will probably be very similar, considering how similar it's been in the past already. But I would like for it to be more self-led and individual, so that people can actually learn at the pace that they want to learn, because no one's going to learn like the best they can at someone else's pace, and no one's going to enjoy it at someone else's pace. So I just think that would probably be what I want most out of it.
Great, thank you. Just before we come to Derry, Lea, that was really interesting what you shared about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What was the name of the model that he stole?
I can't remember. The word that's coming to mind is Blackfoot, but I'm not sure that that's right. So don't quote me on that. But I can chat GPT it. You can chat GPT it.
Yeah, if you could send it to me, I'd be really interested to see that.
I'll have a look. But
Oh,
it's
thank
very
you.
different. It is very different from what he's kind of pushed.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Derry, welcome.
Hi, sorry I'm late. But very interesting in the bits that I picked up. I was just thinking about what you would feel about 3 areas where I'm actually beginning to feel a little bit optimistic. I've got a 4th one now, which was listening to the first half hour of those kids talking this morning. I thought there was a lot of wisdom there that was quite extraordinary in their age. But I wondered what, I'm very much an advocate of self-directed learning in schools that are run democratically with respect for human rights, the sort of alternative, the democratic schools movement, absolutely where I'm coming from. And why I'm feeling a little bit optimistic, and I wondered what you thought about, for example, the OECD, Andreas Schleicher, now moving firmly away from academics and arguing with the new framework for human flourishing. Peace has done so much harm. It's really interesting to hear these people having sort of road to Damascus type conversions. But I think Schleicher has, and he's very influential. People do take a lot of notice. Also, another thing I've been involved in is the all-party parliamentary group looking at votes for 16. Some of the issues that you've been talking about have been coming out in the discussions there. At the last meeting of the group, we heard about what's been going on in Scotland and Wales, and the recognition that the school system is really completely up the creek in preparing kids for the future that you can. It's no longer the future, as you make very clear. It's with us now. And then Rebecca Winthrop's work at the Brookings Institute in New York. She wrote a very interesting book called The Disengaged Teen, and the need for autonomy and self-direction in schools in order to prepare kids for a world that's going to be completely dependent for mental health and well-being on people's capability for being self-starters. You mentioned universal basic income, so to manage a world where UBI is the norm. And the kind of school system they're realizing we've got to move towards, and the one we've got to move away from. I wondered what you felt about that. My 3 sources for optimism: the OECD framework for human flourishing as an alternative to the competitive academic PISA metrics. The work being done at the all-party parliamentary group, which I think you ought to be a part of, if I may say so. The things you are saying are absolutely resonant with the things people feel have got to happen if kids are going to be voting at 16. And then Rebecca Winthrop's disengaged teen thinking. Sorry, I'm going on a bit. I didn't mean to. It's rather rude having come.
That's okay. It's really interesting. I'm not familiar with any of those things, particularly clearly in as much detail as you are.
Oh,
But I mean, they sound fascinating. And I mean, the first one, even just the words and the languaging of kind of human flourishing and thriving, I think touches probably on sort of the point that I was talking about at the end was like as a species, what is our purpose? And I think we've come so far away from it, and that is the systemic element, capitalism or colonialism and then capitalism. We've come so far away from the purpose of our species. We've created all kinds of different frameworks and structures that are hierarchical, that put us at the top of the hierarchy, and we've put ourselves at the top of a tree that doesn't actually exist. We've created that tree and we put ourselves at the top of it, and we are really just part of an ecosystem. The planet is an ecosystem. We are one species in the ecosystem. We've come so far away from that we've completely really lost ourselves as a species. And I mean, this is much deeper than education, I think, but when you're layering education on the top of that, it comes back to what is the purpose of education. But underneath that and deeper than that is what is the purpose of our species. And because we're so far away from it, we're talking about changes and incremental changes and in a system that is basically papering over the top of all of these fundamental issues that we are not talking about in the mainstream because we're so swayed by the current system of capitalism and the 1% at the top who control that and who have vested interests to keep it in place.
thank you. I mean, what's so interesting about the OECD development is that it's been responsible for PISA, which you will know has bolstered the authoritarian, coercive, anxiety, test-based, test-obsessed, capitalistic, exploitative school systems that we've got. PISA has been absolutely underpinning them in setting nation states up against each other to see which one can score the highest on academic metrics. So for the OEC to move from academic metrics to human flourishing, is a big step. And the thinking that's going on is really persuasive and really interesting and exciting for someone like me who has always stood for the self-directed learning in the democratic and human rights respecting context. It's what I've spent my life trying to do in state schools, and at last I can see some international players who are beginning to move in the same direction. So I really recommend you have a look at it. OECD Framework for Human Flourishing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to be late.
That's okay. No, it's fascinating. I'm glad you've chimed in because it's really interesting to hear the different sources and resources and the thinking kind of globally. And it's actually nice to hear that there's some optimism, I think, because it's really easy to get sucked into all of the negative and kind of pessimism of,
Here's another one then before I go. Have a look at the Learning Planet Institute, Learning Ecosystems.
Okay.
Learning Planet Institute, Learning Ecosystems from the Global South. It's an outfit.
Okay.
It's an outfit that's based in Paris that's doing a lot of the thinking that totally relates to what I heard you saying.
I've got that one. Search for that. Have a look at that.
Learning Planet Institute.
Institute.org. I've got that.
Learning Ecosystems. Yeah.
Thank you, Derry.
Hi.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Derry. So I guess we ought to start thinking about wrapping up. It's Friday night after all. Thanks everyone for giving up your Friday night. And thanks, Lea and Noah. Lea and Noah, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
I'm all done. Can't think of anything else I would want to add.
If anyone wants to, we wrote what I call a black paper, which is our version of a white paper about the pilot, which is on the Mission Equality website, which is missionequality.org, and there's a section called resources, and it's basically, I don't know, like 30 pages of just kind of what we learned, what we did, what we learned, the impact of it. It's free. It's just a Google Doc. So if anyone is
interested, put it in the chat actually.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Right to the top, it is up there. It's further
okay,
up.
That's great. So just the specifics, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to get in touch.
Can I just ask a quick question for the time? Or
yeah.
Lea, I just wanted to ask, that was really great. Thank you, Lea and Noah, both of you, and Joe for organising all these sessions. Really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you about the pilot that you did. Do you actually go out into hubs and carry out like those sort of workshops like daytime, you know, or is it more kind of like a 12-week thing, or was it just
It's
something
a
one-off?
12-week thing in one particular location, and so we had a venue that kids came to every week, and then we had guest facilitators come to the venue. But it was a very intentionally chosen venue because it was very nice. And so the
Yeah,
environment, we wanted to have a very nice space that is
yeah,
beyond the usual kind of, community centres and church halls that
yeah. Got you.
affordable. And it was affordable because I lived there as a resident, so I got a really good rate, which made me think we can do this. It's something that we can actually afford to do, and just test the hypothesis of what does it look like when you bring kids into an
Yeah,
environment that actually is different from what they're normally used to.
yeah. Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much, Noah and Lea, for taking the time to talk to us today. And good luck with the next phase of the project. Keep
Thanks
in
for having
touch.
us, Joe, and thanks for running this whole
Thank
event.
you.
It's brilliant.
I just wondered, had you come across my 20% project, Lea?
No.
I've
Oh,
put it in the chat, Derry.
could you? Okay.
Yeah, I did. If we scroll up, it is there.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'll have a look. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, cool. So finally, I'm just going to share a little bit about the course that I've created. Now, if you were here this morning, don't feel you have to sit through this again because it's going to be the same presentation. Obviously, if you'd like to stay, you're very welcome to. So yeah, what I might do for those that were here this morning, if you're just after the course link, I'm just going to stick that in the chat and then you can get that and go. But for those that do want to hear it again, or those that haven't heard it, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I messed up this morning. Well, I shared the screen and then I couldn't work out how to get back. So let's see if I can do
I'm
it
going to
properly.
stop sharing mine first. There
Oh
we go.
yes, that would be
That might
good.
help.
Okay, hang on, let me work this out. Right. Oh, there it is. Now, I just need to work out how to make it bigger. Got my Zoom thing in the way. There we go. Can you hear me? I can't see you all now. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. So, I have created an online course all about alternatives to conventional schooling. It's an online downloadable course which you can work through at your own pace. There are 10 modules, and each one includes a pre-recorded video which introduces a different way to approach education. And the topics include home education, flexi schooling, online schooling, forest school, world schooling, Montessori, Reggio Emilia, self-directed education, democratic education, and consent-based education. Some of the sessions are their presentations and some are interviews, and they're all with really inspiring education innovators and pioneers. There are 14 contributors altogether. On average, they're about an hour long each, some a bit longer, some a bit less. And there are lots of resources that are shared as well as the full transcript. So if people prefer reading to watching, transcripts are available too. I just really want to say a big thank you to my sponsors for helping to make the course a reality. Many of the course sponsors also sponsored this event alongside Collab and Belonging Effect. And to find out more, you can visit info@progressiveeducation.org/intro-course. So the course is £48. Which includes all of the 10 modules. And I've got a discount code for you, which gives you 15% off. And this is valid till the end of April. So if you put April 15 in at the checkout, you'll be able to get 15% off. And then finally, I've got a video to show you, and I hope it works. If it doesn't, maybe unmute yourself and just let me know if you can't hear it properly. But I hope it did work this morning, so hopefully it will work now. It's 9 minutes long, and it just gives kind of a taster as to what's included in the course.
When my son started school, there was just something inside of me that felt wrong. And it started that niggle of a question of, oh, is this the right way to educate? And actually started the question really about what is education and what is learning.
So when we think about education and learning, there is this kind of like automatic thought about school, and school is not necessarily learning, school is school. There's so much education that the curriculum of life offers us. Schooling is very different and is not rooted in education or learning. Here in the United States anyway, that over 19 million families want an alternative to traditional, or what I call conventional schooling, but they just don't know where to start. Education, as seen in this movement, is a sum of everything a person learns that supports them towards living a satisfying and meaningful life.
What is our aim for our children? We want them to grow, to be well-rounded, to be thoughtful, to be capable, to be caring people who actually bring the skills and the gifts that they have to the world around us. We want them to become the best version of themselves. And we need to recognise for some young people that might be in school. But for those where school doesn't work, or those who want to explore imagining a different way to do education, then home education is one pathway, and it's a rich one to discover, and it's an easily individualised one for our young people to go on. And that's one of the many joys of home education.
But there is a significant minority of children at the moment in this country who are struggling to attend school at all. And we think flexi schooling provides an innovative solution for some of those children.
Like many families around the world, I'm sure including many watching this recording, are frustrated with traditional schools and are looking for alternatives. We know that in the US, 2/3 or 75% of learners are reporting negative emotions like hate towards school. The thing that really excites me about online schooling and online education as a whole is how it's accelerating access to quality education. And this is especially powerful in the context of, the work that we're doing and some others in this space, where we're taking models of education that used to be accessible only to some and opening them up to the world.
World schooling is the intentional act of viewing the world as one's classroom. In its simplest form, it's the act of intentionally learning from the world. It combines multi-age and experiential learning with travel and/or cultural experiences to facilitate learning and discovery.
At Forest School, every child has the opportunity for success. There are no tests, no levels, no pressure to perform. Children aren't compared to one another, they're supported as individuals. Forest School is more than outdoor play. It's a journey of self-discovery, connection and growth.
It is not adults' responsibility to kind of like dump education into a child's brain or into their experience, but that they are, sovereign whole people who have the responsibility of their own learning and their own growth. And children deserve to be free. They deserve to play. Self-directed education is not just an alternative to schooling. It's actually an active push against coercive, hierarchical relationships between adults and children. Young people decide what, when, with whom, and how to learn, entirely based on their own interests. There is no predefined curriculum, no mandatory classes, and definitely no standardized tests. We believe in community, mutual aid, and taking care of one another.
Democratic education or democratic schools is a worldwide movement of a pedagogical concept that has been around for more than 100 years at some stages, but most of the schools are maybe 2 or 3 decades old, and it's really all over the world. So it's a very diverse spectrum of schools, and this makes it really hard to define. But we agree usually on 2 main principles or pillars. So the first one would be the principle of the right of self-determination to decide as an individual. And the second principle is the participation, the democratic participation in community processes. For example, there's a discussion around having majority vote or consent-based decision-making as a community. But the main idea is that every person, independently from its age, so avoiding age discrimination, has the same right, the same change to influence in the community agreements.
Maria Montessori herself was a radical and a revolutionary. And she believed that our current way of educating children has stunted the evolution of our species, making us individualistic, petty, violent, destructive, and competitive. And her educational method is therefore intended to liberate the human potential that's inherent in all children and put us on a path towards world peace and the evolution of our species, towards building a more peaceful, liberatory, equitable, interconnected, collaborative world.
This is actually an approach which is born from a very emotive place. After the Second World War, some women from the community had a very strong desire to create a new school, a different kind of school. So to do that, we want them to be educated differently, to be different types of humans in the world with different type of agency, a different type of autonomy and control over their own lives, and a say and a voice, a louder, bigger, more prominent voice in the community than they felt they'd had. And so they wanted these schools to be places that really nurtured children and enabled them to develop key skills in critical thinking, collaboration, creativity. And the idea behind that really is that they wanted to develop a place where children could grow up to be thinkers and learners rather than just recipients of knowledge in a sort of a traditional sense, an old-fashioned sense of school.
Like, why are schools so authoritarian? Like, why are they so coercive and controlling? Why is there a lot of parenting culture where it's basically dominating the kids? Like, why is this all as it is? And after a lot of searching for answers about that, I ended up coming to a place of, I don't know, developing a kind of historically informed sense of that, and realizing that one of the key sort of shift points was about consent. And that's talking about the relationship you have with the other, whether that's the environment, your friend, your partner, anything that you are now relating to. And consent means that the things that are happening are okay for both people involved, you know, that people are able to make a freely informed choice about what they do. What we were trying to develop was a system of education that was highly resilient to a changing world. We have to find new and different ways of addressing the problems of the time and supporting each other, living, learning, thriving, relating.
This movement is gaining momentum as the world changes rapidly and we realize that future jobs are unknown. The sustainability of our planet is at risk. And I think, in my opinion, our society is yearning for more connection. Even if it doesn't end up being that you send your kids to any of these three programs, you know, that there is a yearning, I think, that we have for something different. I think that folks should be reaching for this information through organizations, through courses like this, and just changing their mind about what schooling is doing. And whether or not it's something we want to participate in anymore, because we can at any point just divest from it and do something different.
Okay, so I hope you can still hear me. So that's a little flavour as to what the course offers. I guess I created it for a younger version of me, really. I really could have done with this course 10 years ago when my son started school. I just knew that it wasn't right for him, but I had no idea that there were alternatives. As I think this course would have been particularly helpful for explaining to other people around me that conventional schooling isn't the only way. So I'm hoping it'll be helpful to others going through the same thing, and also maybe for educators who might be exploring what types of learning environments to work in, or maybe students who are wondering what path to take. So I'm just going to stop sharing. Derry, did that sound work okay?
Yep, fine.
Oh, good. Okay. I wasn't sure if it came through all right. Great. So I think I've put the course link in the chat and I'll email it out to everybody. Thank you for coming. Thanks for giving up your Friday night. And thanks for joining me in this event. Does anyone have any questions? I'm just going to stop recording, actually. Hang on.
No, just a comment. Brilliant job. Well done.